So he's sleeping now, huh?
Yeah.
Sleep. All right. So we were beginning to talk about resentment that is so pervasive that it has to do somewhat with almost every action that we ever take. And yet it's only when we begin to practice sati do we see the two, let us say, the two delusions clashing with reality. One delusion is the delusion that I'm going to get something eventually out of meditation. And then we get to the point of, oh, I have gotten some of that. And now I have to deal with something that is some new problem that arose. And so we resent that because we expect that the karma machine has developed our skill well enough that we should be able to handle this problem too effortlessly. And we don't like the fact that, oh, I need to sit down and meditate again. We don't want to do that. We said, I've already done that, and I've still got problems.
I had to do that today.
So it's germane. This is the point. Is that we begin to resent that we've got to meditate, but because it's really old, that resentment is one of those old sankaras that pop up. Then they do that when they have the opportunity. And so you've had that kind of thing, let us say, pushed back or suppressed a bit, is almost like a spring-loaded resentment, so that as soon as that trigger is pulled, now, whoop, the resentment comes up. Now, that resentment that is coming up is also related to the resentment of, why haven't I arrived yet? Or why haven't I grown up yet? Why do I still have to struggle?
Yeah.
Why do I still see myself as a student or a child rather than an adult or a master of my life? You see how they're interconnected?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
in fact, it's the same thing. Now, one of the choices that people can make is, all right, I'm just going to sit here and wallow in my bad feelings, including resentment, and I'm going to be satisfied with that.
Yeah.
But eventually that's going to lead guilt in. In fact, guilt is already a budding ingredient in the bottom of that mix. The guilt of not doing the practice, or the guilt of, is probably not so strong when we're saying, oh, well, I'm practicing. I'm just practicing easier. In other words, instead of taking right effort, I'm going to take no effort. And that no effort then has to do with the quality of trying to become satisfied with your dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
And I'm saying it that intentionally because it can be said, and it sounds quite a good idea. In fact, they call it choiceless awareness. And it's hard to get people to understand that, oh, all right, let's look at it this way. You're standing in the middle of the road, and now you see a big truck bearing down on you. But you're going to be choicelessly aware of that truck as it runs over you. Well, if it's going to run over you anyway, then what's the point of even paying attention to whether there's trucks out there on the road or not? Why not just be blissfully unaware and just take trucks as they smash into us? Why should I even bother to have sati if I'm not going to take the effort to get out of the road? Now, that's easy for us to say, let us say, as an idea or a concept, but then in practice, the idea comes up was, what the hell? You mean I've got to get out of the road again? I've become an absolute expert at coming out of the road. Why should I bother to come out of the road again? Why don't I just be satisfied that this truck is going to run me over? I mean, the whole point of meditation is to learn to be satisfied. You can see the logic, but you can also see that this is a false logic. That we cannot become dissatisfied, or we cannot become satisfied with our dissatisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
That's not possible. And so now we're called in the feelings of trying to become satisfied with dissatisfaction, resentful of the dissatisfaction, and guilty because we're not actually becoming satisfied, that we're willing to settle for being satisfied with being dissatisfied. And so all of these feelings get mixed in there together, and that the student, in fact, can bounce back and forth between each one of them until they realize, oh no, the original practice that we started is the way to get started again. And old Goenka comes in and says, never mind, start again. Or in this analogy, never mind, step out of the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had this exact thing happen. I got, I made the mistake of turning on the news this morning. And got myself sort of in that sort of negative spiral down because, you can just get so wrapped up in it because it's so ludicrous and corrupt.
Yes, but it's so heavy, which means it also sinks.
And realized that I was really unhappy, and I was like, I'm just, because you justify it because you say this is righteous indignation, let's say that like that. Okay. Or something like that, or you're justifying to yourself, I have a right to be mad, right?
Right, exactly.
And so I said, no, I don't. I need to sit down and get myself out of this. And then I realized,
you don't want to get out of it. You like being in that righteousness.
But what I like better than that is just clarity of mind. And that's what I realized, is that even the political figures that I may like are probably less emotionally attached to their campaigns than I am, because they couldn't stay as consistent if they were emotionally wrapped up in every little blip and blop along the road, or poll that comes in, or anything like that. And so I just realized I need to just I know where I stand, and I don't need to be emotionally. I can have a point of view without being emotionally attached. And yeah, and that's much better.
Well, let us say about the politics. The way that the Constitution of the United States is set up, it is set up for conflict resolution. It is not set up for a system of no conflict. And that right now there is a lot of conflict, but there has always been conflict. That's the way that's the system that is set up that way. And not only that, but we've talked about it in the sense is that it is those who get wrapped up in it are the ones who run for office. That the wise people can see that it's a game of conflict. and that the winner of it then is able to say, finally, I'm the adult here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right now, the politics are such that there's a lot of shouting going on. But there's always this conflict, no matter how loud the shouting is. And right now, the shouting is not as loud as it once was.
Mm-hmm.
Like in 1859, shouting was really loud then, and then they got even louder in 1860. Okay, so the United States has been, and surprisingly enough, it's the same players,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the oppressed, the very wealthy, and that those who behave to do the suppression and the oppression of because I mean the wealthy are not going to do their own suppression.
Mm-hmm.
That owned the plantation, it was not the plantation owner that carried the whip. No, that
Mm-hmm.
was the plantation manager or a group of that. And in fact, when the Civil War ended, you had three groups of people then. You had the plantation or the landowners who were continuing to be well off, but then the rowdies or the managers or the ones who carried the whips to keep the slaves in line, they were the ones who wound up being the most hurt because the slaves were getting free. But all the slavers were out of a job.
Mm-hmm.
So now you can see that that's that same kind of setup now in politics, to where the voters on the Republican Party side are the ones who feel oppressed most because they're out of their status.
Mm-hmm.
And that coming out of that status started in 1860 and it's not over yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the wealthy know how to operate the politicians to keep everybody dissatisfied. Well, when you have a noisy, dissatisfied group over here, they're going to wake everybody up, and now everybody's going to be noisy and dissatisfied, except on the other side, the left, by the way, is the group then that are not cohesive because each one of them is just trying to live their lives. They're just ordinary people. But they do see that the government should be altruistic in the sense of taking care of everyone, to where the oppressed slavers, the ones who lost their jobs or lost their status, they lost their whip, they cannot do that kind of job anymore. They are resentful and they're unified in their resentment. They know who the enemy is. It's those other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're much more unified. Now, that other group changes. At one time, it was the blacks, then it became the Hispanics, and now it's the immigrants. But it's easy to keep moving around that finger. And so the Republican Party will get that righteous, racist Southern mentality that is so strong. I mean, you live in Arkansas, you know
Yeah.
exactly what I'm talking about. And so that is almost like a fire hose going off constantly. And it is the Republican politicians who aim that fire hose at whichever way is to their advantage.
Yeah.
And everyone in that group feels that they're oppressed. And that actually goes back to the practice of meditation, because that's how the advanced meditator is that why can't I just stand in the road? I own this road. Why doesn't that truck watch where he's going? It's not my fault. And so if that truck runs over me, it's the truck's fault.
I feel like there's there's an added element to it here, which is that my parents, now with the internet, social media, all that stuff, that the most vocal people are the, let's say, like my stepdad or something like that, or just anybody on there just saying very stupid things. And there's this willful ignorance because they have this means to get all the information that they need, but they don't want to hear it because they want to remain in this willfully ignorant state where they believe, where they can blame somebody small like them, or they want to remain in this. They're also kind of trapped in their status too. They want their status
Exactly.
in this
This
world of
road belongs
status.
to me. Exactly. That's the statement I was making as a metaphor. You're laying it right out in this activity. But this road belongs to me. I've got a right to stand in this road. I practiced really hard of learning how to manipulate this road. And now it's up to that Mack truck to get out of my way. This is my road.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? People actually drive their cars with that mentality. It's very subtle, but it has to do with the right of way. And this side of the road belongs to me, and that lane is yours. Which means if anything interferes with my lane, I'm going to have the thought they should not be here, and I wind up in an accident because I'm not watching where I'm going. To where in Thailand they have a completely different mentality. No one has ever tried to enforce those kinds of rules, that the road from day one before cars or motorcycles or anything, the road was to be shared. So now that's the traffic idea. So instead of driving on the left or the right side of the road, the Thais now drive on the side of the road that's most convenient. So they kind of drive on the same side of the road as everybody else does, but there's no rule or law against that. In fact, you can see people driving right down the middle of the wrong side of the road easily in Thailand without an idea of stopping or turning or whatever. They just could see far enough ahead to know that there's nobody there. So this is easy enough.
Mm-hmm.
You can also see times when on a 2-lane road, there's going to be 3 to 5 lanes of traffic, all in the same spot, going this way and that way, with 3 cars straddling. One of them coming this direction, 2 of them were going that direction, and happened with one of them right in the middle of the road. On the same time, you got motorbikes on the side.
I see why you're a nervous driver.
Actually, no. It's really, if you're watching where you're going, then it's safe.
Yeah.
The feeling of unsafe is when they see people not breaking, or when they see people breaking what they think of as this is the way that things should be.
Mm-hmm.
When you're capable of dealing, see, and that's really funny. I'm not the nervous one. You're the one who's nervous when you hear that kind of story. But the Thais, if you go to the local hospital here, the Thais are not the ones who are getting their wounds dressed from falling off their motorbikes. It's the Westerners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Partly because of the way that they were trained to drive, partly because some of them are not used to motorbikes, and very few of them are used to having highways that are prone to be sandy. And every highway and every road on this island is prone to be sandy, which means you got to take that in consideration.
A lot of people in the West, the motorbike is considered, it's kind of like the midlife crisis outlet of choice. Like my aunt and uncle bought motorcycles when they were around 45, and they rode them around for a couple of years, and then they decided, we're done with motorcycles. It's not,
Right.
it's just something fun for, people to do so they don't have experience.
There are at least 10 motorbikes for every car on this island.
Mm-hmm.
That renting a motorbike is cheap. Renting a car is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
From $20 to $30 a day for a car. You can rent a motorbike for $5.
Wow.
So if 2 people come on vacation, even with a kid, it's cheaper to rent 2 motorbikes than it is a car.
Hmm.
And in fact,
Yeah.
almost all of the cars are built per mountain. It's for those who want to go way up in the mountains. So this idea of getting back to the points that we were covering, one is to backtrack into the fact that people vote according to their fear. If people are not afraid, they don't vote. And so both parties now have the job of getting their folks afraid enough. I mean, everybody knows that the Democrats going to win, but the Democrats can't say that because then all the Democrats will stay home and don't vote.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, all of the Republicans are fired up because that's their normal state. They're just on fire, especially when the Republican Party keeps feeding and stoking that fire and paying a lot of money for a lot of social media and whatnot to get them and keep them all fired up so that they will vote. But that's actually a very small minority of the people of the United States.
Yeah.
Down to 20 to 30% mark. But the really intelligent people, they don't vote.
Yeah. Yep.
Why should I vote? Because both parties are trying to keep everybody afraid. But the Democrats, at least with the progressive part of it, has the idea that, wait a minute, maybe the government should be able to do something for a whole lot of people rather than doing it for only the very wealthy.
Yeah.
In the old, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's the part of it that if you watch the news daily, it gets under your skin because the entire, corporate structure of our capitalist system is actively fighting against anything that would be in the advantage of regular, normal people, the bottom 99%. And
So, in
so,
fact,
yeah,
go ahead.
they're like the slave, they're like the whip master. Like, I feel like the media is at the behest, they're all owned by billionaires. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're cracking the whip, on the people, feeding them misinformation, because they're just, and it's sort of a mess. But unless we can find this common cause, and I feel like that this income inequality is sort of a common cause right now for a lot of people to get behind, but it's how do we get the information out, and to see that the information is controlled by these corporate interests. That's where you get frustrated, and that's where I have to disengage emotionally,
Uh-huh. Exactly so. And when you recognize both sides of that yes, what they're telling you is a pack of lies. But you don't have to resent that they're telling a pack of lies. You just know that they are. This is, in fact, what the Buddha is thinking about or talking about in the issue of Sila Bhatta Paramasa. Is that it's actually instinctual for us to want to go along to get along, to go along with society, or to rebel against it.
Mm-hmm.
And the real point that we have to do in wisdom is to learn to rise above it. That both sides of that fight are in the mud. They're all completely covered with mud. Both sides, or if you got, like in India, 7 parties, and all 7 parties are covered with mud. At one time, when Israel was having conflict with whoever they were at the moment, Lebanon, there was dirt on both sides. They were both playing dirty. That's what war is playing dirty. So in all cases of conflict, there is this dirt going on. Now, there's another way of dealing with it, and that's generally the Thai way, which is actually quite frustrating. And they go to the point of conflict avoidance, so that once two people have a conflict, they'll both forget about it, except that I'm not going to deal with him anymore. And that happens sometimes in families, but generally the grandmothers will grab both the dad and the boy by the ear and sit them down and say, "You two have to get together because this conflict cannot be avoided." But then the real issue, the real growing up, the real wisdom is to recognize that there's no conflict, or that the conflict that you see is like the WWE. It's an ongoing, staged disaster of a fight. There's a tempest in a teapot. It's much ado about nothing. That's exactly what Shakespeare could see with it, when he would say all the world's a stage and everyone is an actor. The question is can you recognize that this is just a performance? This conflict between the Democrats and the Republicans is built into the system of government that the Americans have chosen for themselves, and it will always be in a fist fight. It will always be mud wrestling. It has always been mud wrestling. They were doing big mud wrestling with a whole lot of harm back in the 1860s. And again in the 1960s. It's just time enough for it again. Every 70 to 100 years, and here it comes again.
Yeah, and yeah, what you were saying about getting out of the road, that's definitely how I'm feeling, is that most of the time I don't have any problem with the truck. I can get out of the way easily. But there are certain, trigger points, certain things still, that I have to sit down and deal with. And it takes some time.
You don't even,
takes some time.
Right, but you really don't have to sit down and deal with it. In the sense of letting it run its course. That as soon as you recognize, oh, I'm on that one again. And let's say something tragic, like now you got a kid in the hospital, and you're at home, and you're thinking about that kid in the hospital. Now you're saying, oh, well, I shouldn't think about the kid in the hospital. Let me go sit down and meditate so that I can think a while about the kid being in the hospital and thinking that I shouldn't be thinking about the kid in the hospital. All right. So the answer to that really is, as soon as you recognize that that you got a kid in the hospital, you don't have to think about it, because if you do think about it, you're not helping that kid. He's in the hospital because you trust the doctors will do what they need to do. Leave him alone. You concentrate on being a great big smiley face when you go see your kid in the hospital, instead of worried about, oh, I've been so worried about you in the hospital. It's not the way to go to a hospital. And you don't have to work at getting thoughts of kid in the hospital out of the mind. Just as soon as you see it, you can say, I'm getting out of that road. Let me be here now at home, not there at the hospital.
Yeah.
All right, so that's just one example. So I don't know of an example that you could have that does not fit that model. Whatever it is that we get on, we need to get off of it as soon as we recognize that we got back on it. But we don't want to, because for instance, with the politics, we feel righteous.
Yeah.
I'm right, and all of those other sides are wrong. And it's okay for me to be dissatisfied with my opinions of them. I'm satisfied with being in a state of dissatisfaction, which is exactly the same. yeah, I'm worried about my kid. Okay. And it's okay that I'm worried about my kid because
Mm-hmm.
somehow magically my worry is going to help my kid. If I don't worry about him, he'll get worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I just got through talking to my wife about this. She came home with a gripe about one of her office mates, and I just said, "Hey, look around. It's Friday. Look how great it is. Take a deep breath." You know, and I can tell her that easily, but then every once in a while, but I do genuinely hate, and I can feel when I'm getting in that. It's like a repetitive cesspool that your mind gets in, and it feeds on itself, and
Mhm.
there's nothing to do but get out of it.
Exactly.
I just some things can still trick me into it. You know,
You exactly so. So
Mhm.
a way that we could talk about those kind of thoughts, I like this one because it's so funny, is the bar bouncer. There he is at the front door, and he's going to let what thoughts come into this bar that he wants to have in. Is this thought well dressed? Is it well mannerly? Is it on my list? And if it's not, you don't get in. But sometimes we let some of those guys get in. They get high on the Dhamma or whatever. They start making a mess. And now time to recognize them and throw them out.
Mhm.
To
Yeah.
throw those thoughts out, and we can do that. So, in that regard, that you've now entertained that, like your wife was um, complaining about the woman at work, it's possible for her to fume all weekend. That woman forgot all about it, and on Monday morning, your wife starts up with it again.
Mhm.
So she's been miserable all Friday, all Saturday, all Sunday, and now she's making two people miserable on Monday. So
I've kind of taken to getting pretty adamant and angry about it like you do. I say, "Hey, just throw that out. You don't need it. You can do it. You can
well,
do it.
don't get
I
angry.
believe in you."
Yes, actually, another way of doing it is joyfully. Aha, I see you. Aha, you're calling about Juliet to work again. Ha ha, caught you. And let her see it that way too, joyfully, to be
Yeah.
free from thinking about the woman at work, because it really is suffering. And somehow or
Mm.
another, we want to make it satisfying that it's okay for us to be dissatisfied with the woman at work. This is, I don't know why humans do that, but it
Yeah.
really gets into and messes with our meditation.
Oh yeah.
And
I think the
even,
news media is all it is centered around that cesspool of thought. People getting into that cesspool of thought, and it's all geared towards whatever side you're on. You're getting into that same cesspool of righteous indignation and rumination,
and we're
and
right and they're wrong, and what a disaster if our team doesn't get together.
hmm,
And we got to beat that guy, but nobody's doing it the way I want to beat that guy. And so I'm afraid we're not going to beat that guy. And oh, they moan and they moan. We've got to get
hmm,
the base ginned up. We got to get people out to vote. If we don't, we'll lose. And so what if you do lose? Then you go home and you can relax finally.
hmm, hmm,
Here's an
yeah,
interesting point about the Dhamma. I mean, because a lot of people with Dhamma, they think that, oh, I should be socially active. I've seen meditation retreat centers and like Lion's Roar and other publications, Shambhala and whatnot, and they're out actively trying to get Buddhist meditators agitated enough to go to some meeting or uh, global warming or become an activist or whatever. But
hmm,
here's the point: if we could get people to the point, let us say about Washington, that nobody cared, and that Washington became a very sleepy town with
hmm,
not much legislation happening, then everybody would be so much better off.
yeah,
That the fact that And that would just be one. You still have big business to deal with, I know, but at least we could deal with government by getting everybody just disinterested in it, because it's government that makes everybody so angry. That's their intention.
Yeah.
If they can't get you angry and motivated, you won't go out to vote. And so if the people that want to do something about global, they should stay home and not take their car to the rally.
Yeah, it's yeah, that it's tough, but it's just that seems as though none of that is doing any good. Well,
No, it's
regardless
not.
of us doing any
You're
good.
right.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. There is nothing that you or I can do about the outside world, about politics, about government, about religion, about big business, about the problems with our educational system. Any of those big industries, we can't do anything about, but I can get out on my own road. I can keep from running myself down with my own thoughts.
Yeah, whatever, it has to start with you. And I think that any broad sweeping change that happens, usually it becomes a commonplace thing. It's not like some activist, comes along and they declare victory over climate change. It's going to sort of naturally happen either way. Either we're going to go electric, we're going to get rid of, using fossil fuels, or it's just not going to happen.
People are going to start buying more Teslas. They're going to get better at doing batteries, that they're going to figure out a way of doing it. They're going to have big windmills in the sky that's capturing carbon dioxide and turning it into dry ice and putting it in the bottom of the ocean. And the corals will die out, but they won't die completely. There'll be at least one coral left, and then the coral will come back, and everything's on a big cycle.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, everybody's feeling bad about whatever point on the cycle they are. When they're on the top of the world, they still feel bad. When we're on the bottom, they still feel bad. The question is that it doesn't matter what cycle the planet is on. Can you feel good, even to the point that now it's killing you? Can you die happy?
Yeah.
That's the part that's so difficult for us to get a hold of, is that at any time we need to just throw those thoughts out, and I can be happy without thinking about that stuff. I can get out of my own way.
I know that to be true, and some illusions are easy to deal with, but some illusions seem so real and so vital and so important and so whatever. They can just be right in your face.
And it takes effort. It takes some effort to say, okay, that too shall pass. Goenka had a story about somebody who had a ring, and it stayed in somebody's grandmother's drawer or something until after she died, and it, the whole story. I've forgotten the story, but inside the ring was the inscription of "This too shall pass." Whatever is happening, it's going to be pass away, and some new crisis is going to be there. And then no matter what it is, that too shall pass, and there'll be yet a new crisis.
Yeah, everybody thinking that, we're going to solve global warming and everything's going to be fine.
No, nothing is going to be fine until the mind is fine. And then it doesn't matter whether the world is fine or not. Yeah. And wanting the world to be fine is both past and future. We're thinking in the past and thinking in the future. But in all cases, right now is marvelous. Right now, at this very moment, things are wonderful. The only thing that's bad about it is my own thoughts. Thinking about over there or back then or maybe in the future things are going to be bad, therefore I should feel bad now.
Yeah. That sort of brings me to think about kind of where my meditation is, where my practice has gotten to lately, which is just sort of I just sort of started looking up all kinds of techniques and just to see, trying other things out, just because I just sort of, it's gotten a little bit more experimental, and I was just sort of, I've been experimenting with it. I find that the breath work is always something I'm doing all the time, really, whenever I can think about it. Just like it's sort of a thing that I want to do. It's just a source of, energy, whatever. But I started just sitting, kind of, just sitting, and
they call
sort
it
of
zazen,
Yeah. But the only reason I'm doing it is because I've started really being more able to just be feeling my whole body constantly and sort of in my body, and I can really get the mind quiet, and so I feel like I can do that. I can't. That makes sense to me. The just sit. It makes a lot of sense. And so, and then there's some other just techniques that I picked up from like Dzogchen, where just some pointers that they have, like just relaxing yourself more completely, and how they meditate with their eyes open, where they kind of leave sky gazing. If you ever heard of that, where you sort of leave your eyes open, and I got to the point where I had one sit where it was like everything defocalized. All my sense stuff it was like completely defocused, I want to say, where it just all felt like one thing, where I heard a sound in the distance, and the sound was just, it was like all one big, the feeling and the sight and it all came together, and it was all in me. I just felt it as just being me.
Yes.
So
it's hard to talk about, I know.
It is.
But we do have a few words like at one-ment, or one with everything, or to merge with the universe. Jesus had a way of saying it in the sense of God is without and God is within.
Yeah.
In Buddhism, we have the concept called the Dhammakai, or the full body of the Dhamma, which is including the whole universe. Have you ever heard of the book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what, their catchphrase is, don't panic. But when we hear the word galaxy, we often think of it as the universe. And if the universe is seen as the full-blown Dhamma, everything, then we could actually call it the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Dhamma. And it's exactly the same thing with exactly the same phrase, don't panic. Now, panic is nothing but a very intense worry or a very intense anxiety. But panic is actually that which drives us to do things that we don't need to do. When people are in a panic, they operate frantically. But when you come to that state of at-one-ment, when you truly are the hitchhiker in the galaxy, or just, just hitching a ride, that you're part of it.
Mhm.
and that we're here just to enjoy the show.
Yeah. Yeah, that was definitely like that happened, and I was like, okay, I'm on the right track here. I felt like I got very, very close to something, but it's like I
How
couldn't
about
calm
there
my
you were? It wasn't
yeah.
something close. It was, this is it.
Or that I wanted to stay there longer. I'll put it that way. But
Yes, that's exactly what we've got to do. When we get into that state, that's a state of satisfaction. It really is satisfying to be here now.
yeah. Yeah.
And so we want to maintain that, which means that any thoughts that come up have to be judged as, is this thought worthy of coming in and not destroying my at-one-ment or my atonement? Or is it going to pull me back into the lower state to miss the mark? So atonement or at-one-ment is like being free from sin, because we're here now. And so all of these concepts are built right into Christianity. They just don't have a clue about what their own religion trying to teach them.
Yeah.
So, but this is an actual great part of the Zen and the Theravada. But the problem that is in Theravada, is, in fact, it's the thing that drew me to it, is that it is so concise, it's so precise, it lays things out exactly the way that they should be seen in a step-by-step 1, 2, 3 processing, as if Theravada was set up to show exactly how to build a factory so that you can, let us say, Dunkin' Donuts, and you're just making one donut after another after another. And the real problem with that is that people get into thinking then that the practice is building donut factories. No, the real point is, let's have a donut. And so all of these concepts of Four Noble Truths, an Eightfold Noble Path, and 12 Steps of Paticca Samuppada, and the 4 Satipatthana, and the 5 Powers, and the 16 Steps of Anapanasati, and the 7 Factors of Enlightenment, and the 3 kinds of feeling, and you get my point?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
all
I
of
went
that.
through all of those right before let go. I made sure I was checking my list.
But it's not all of those things. Those are just merely different ways of looking at the fact that what we're actually doing is we're gathering together all of the really important factors.
Yeah.
In order to be at one, to be in that unification of mind, to bring things together. But in order to do that, you've got to see your manifest. You got to say, oh, I need 5 of those and 4 of those, and all of that, and we put all that together, and then we've got a really wonderful, congruent vehicle.
Right. Yeah.
And so all the component parts of building that factory or building that ship is what Theravada is all about. And really all we need to do is learn how to go sailing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
instead of doing so much
building
shipbuilding.
a motorcycle and riding a motorcycle are two
Not
completely different things.
different things, exactly. And
Yeah.
so that's basically the problem with Theravada, is that it's all about building the motorcycle, including milling of all the parts and everything like that. To where Zen is actually much more like the mechanics of it, not in the sense of all of the parts. It's, and in fact, the book Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance comes then. Is let's get this machine ready to roll.
Mm-hmm.
That's the just sitting, or the zazen, and that kind of stuff. And then the next step, after we get the motorcycle maintenance, it's ready to roll. So let's go for a ride. That's what the whole point is all about. Let's go for a ride. And yet Theravada is all about all of the various components of a motorcycle. Zen is how to fine tune the darn thing. And neither one of them are out there riding around. Tooling on down the path. So this is basically what we're getting at, is that there's really nothing to be done, except that when that thought comes into the mind, the thought of the woman at work, throw that thought out. Or if you're going to have a thought, the thought will be, let's have a really wonderful morning. Let me go buy some donuts. Let's go practice Zen in the art of donuts on this lady at work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Rather than thinking about her all weekend. Or thinking about a kid that's in the hospital, or thinking about global warming, or thinking about Donald Trump. As they say, you either love him or hate him. Well, stop doing both those things and see him. It's just a joke. I mean, it's just entertainment, and he's a marvelous entertainer.
Yeah.
So it's all about our own mind space. Can we, in fact, get on that motorbike and go for a ride?
Yeah, I feel like maybe it's like riding a bull too. It's kind of like, how long can you stay on too at some point? And it's and your own, and if I could really just be right in sync with the bull and not and not have an internal dialogue with myself about how long am I going to stay on? How long am I going to stay on? And then that back and forth will just knock you straight out.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. I agree with you 100%. And when it does, the first thing, or the only thing that we should be asking as we're getting up, is that, let me back on that bull. It's not even, can I get back on it? It's, let me back on it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get ourselves into that state of satisfaction again, over and over again, because we're going to lose it. It's going to happen over and over again. That people think that, oh, once I get into that state of atonement or at one-ment, I'm going to stay there. No, you're not. Human mind doesn't work that way. Anicca vata sankhara. Everything is in flux.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like a bull ride. Can you get back on? Because you're going to get knocked off.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and I can understand that people will have it. I just got knocked off that bull again. Damn it! I've just been spending so much time getting on the bull. Why do I have to get back on it again? That's that resentment coming in.
Yeah, and the resentment, which I'm noticing a lot more, noticing that resentment, and that's really a problem. Just treating
Not down to see it.
treating meditation like something to be guilty about is just completely antithetical to what you're trying to do. And it's really a lot more subtle now than it used to be. But I can sense that it's there for some things, like things that I like you were saying. I thought I was over that. I thought I was done with that. What does this mean? I'm a
Exactly.
sham.
Right.
I'm full of shit.
I'm not who I thought I was.
Mm,
I thought I was an accomplished meditator. I thought I was finished with that.
yeah. Just
And we're not.
I
We're flux. Where
I
everything
got to
is.
remind myself that I'm no one, and that's much better. It is much better.
Well, another way of saying it is, rather than I'm no one, is whoops, I'm not that anymore. Whoops, I'm not that either. Whoops, there I go again.
Mm-hmm.
Or there I left again because I'm not that either. We're like a
Yeah.
grasshopper, and we think that a grasshopper is a place, and a grasshopper is not. It's a hopping.
Yeah.
Everything is processed.
Yeah, and constantly trying to grasp on to whatever it is and knowing that it's not anything. I lost a lot of weight last year, and you had this goal oriented mind, and I thought, man, once I lose this weight, I'm going to be so happy. But I mean, you lose it a pound at a time. Are you going to be that much happier 1 pound later? It's just, there's never a point where you cross some imaginary finish line. It just
And if you do, you become satisfied. You start to eat again, and you get fat again, and then you say, "Wait a minute! I spent all that time." It's everything's a cycle.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Letting go of the struggle is letting go of the illusion that I'm ever going to be able to maintain any sort of state of mind or anything.
Mm-mm.
It just ain't going to happen.
And it always boils back to never mind, start again. Pick
Mm.
yourself up, dust yourself off one more time, and boogie on down the road.
Well, this is a good
And
talk.
yeah, so watch for that resentment because nothing is perfect. Everything's subject to stress. And when you see it, get out of it. And when you're out of it, say, wow, this is so nice. I like this. And so we want to maintain it, but we don't.